You ever walk into a room with someone you love, and within 5 minutes, feel like you don't even exist? That was me last Saturday night. My wife, Madison, had been planning this company party for weeks. It was hosted by her boss, in one of those fancy rooftop venues downtown, the kind with glowing chandeliers, jazz playing softly in the background, and champagne that tastes like it costs more than your rent. She looked stunning that night. Midnight blue dress. Hair perfectly done. I was proud to be the man walking in beside her. But the moment we stepped through the glass doors, everything shifted. It was like I disappeared. She didn't introduce me. Didn't even glance back when people swarmed her with compliments and fake laughs. I tried to stand close, thinking maybe she'd loop me into the conversation. But nope. Instead, I stood there, holding her coat like some forgotten assistant while she flirted with her coworkers and charmed every executive in the room. She laughed too loudly at her boss's jokes. Touched his arm when she didn't need to. And when one of the women finally asked, "Oh, is this your friend?" Madison laughed and said, "Oh, he's just here with me. Just here with me. Not my husband. Not even my partner." I was background noise. And in that moment, something inside me snapped. I smiled politely, nodded to the group, and turned around. I didn't make a scene. I didn't yell. I didn't beg for her attention. I just walked out. Right into the cold night air, leaving her designer coat hanging on my arm and her carefully curated image behind me. But that was only the beginning. That I didn't go home. Not right away. Instead, I wandered the city for hours, past glowing storefronts and empty benches, trying to process what had just happened. I wasn't angry. Not yet. Anger implies you still care enough to fight. What I felt was colder, like something had quietly died inside me. By the time I reached our apartment building, the doorman looked surprised. "Back already, sir?" I nodded, gave him a tight smile, and headed up. The place was dark. Quiet. Sterile. Her perfume still lingered in the air. Her heels were gone from the hallway. That dress, the one she picked out with so much care, it was for them. For him. For them all. Not for me. I didn't pack a suitcase. I didn't leave a note. I just grabbed the essentials, my laptop, a bag of clothes, my passport, and the key to the storage unit I kept across town. By the time she walked into the apartment at 2:34 a.m., makeup slightly smudged, phone still in her hand, I was already gone. She probably thought I was sleeping in the spare room. Maybe sulking. Maybe sulking the way she used to accuse me of doing whenever I wasn't beaming with pride at her career. But I wasn't sulking. I was vanishing. I turned off my phone the next morning. Cancelled our shared streaming accounts. Disconnected from our joint bank account. Left my wedding ring in the bathroom of a highway diner 2 towns over. I was done being invisible. It was time she saw what gone really looked like. That it took her 2 days to realize I was actually gone. On the 3rd day, I turned my phone on just long enough to check my emails, not hers, not texts, just the critical stuff, and saw a flood of missed calls and messages. "Where are you? Are you okay? This isn't funny. Come home. We need to talk." The last one hit differently. "Why would you humiliate me like this after everything I've done for us?" Us? I stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the reply button. But what was there to say? That the woman I married, the woman who once cried in my arms over burnt toast and danced barefoot with me in the kitchen, had slowly become a stranger? That her ambition turned cold? That somewhere between her late nights and power lunches, I became invisible, not just to her, but to myself? Instead of replying, I deleted every message and powered off the phone again. Back at the storage unit, I set up my temporary life. A mattress. A desk. A prepaid phone. Silence. Some people dream of escaping. I did it. But escape isn't always freedom, at least not at first. There were moments I doubted myself. Moments I wondered if I'd overreacted. But then I'd remember that night. Her laugh. Her dismissive tone. The way she treated me like a ghost. And the doubt would dissolve like sugar in boiling water. I wasn't running. I was rebuilding. By the end of the week, mutual friends started reaching out. I ignored most of them, especially the ones who used phrases like, "she's just stressed," or, "you know how these work events are." But one message caught my eye. It was from Luke, Madison's old college friend. The only one who ever told me, bluntly, "You sure she's not using you as a placeholder until she levels up?" His text was short. "Thought you should know, she told everyone you had a mental episode and stormed off. She's playing the victim hard. That was her game. Control the narrative. Paint herself in flattering light. Turn my silence into her tragedy." I almost laughed. This woman, the one who pretended I didn't exist in front of her boss, was now spinning the story that I'd snapped. But that's the thing about people who ignore you for too long. When you finally disappear, they need a story. They can't admit you just left. Quietly. With dignity. Because if they do, they'd have to admit they pushed you away. I didn't respond to Luke. But I did make one move. I emailed Madison. Just a few lines. "Don't worry. I'm not coming back. I'm not trying to hurt you. I just finally realized I wasn't part of your world anymore, and that's okay. You made me invisible. I just finished the job. No signature. No threats. Just truth." She didn't reply. At least not directly. But 2 days later, I got a call from her sister. I didn't answer, but the voicemail was full of frantic questions, accusations, and finally, silence. It was sinking in. For the first time in years, Madison didn't have control. And she was unraveling. A month passed. I kept a low profile, new city, temporary job, cash gigs. I wasn't hiding. I was detoxing. Relearning how it felt to exist without constantly shrinking to make space for someone else's spotlight. Then came the email. Not from Madison. From her boss. His name sat bold in my inbox, subject line, "Confidential, a personal matter, Curiosity 1." I opened it. "I'm reaching out with caution and respect. There have been rumors. Madison mentioned you had emotional instability and vanished after a fight. But something isn't adding up. Her story keeps shifting. And recently, she's been acting erratic at work. I don't want to pry, but if there's context I'm missing, I'd appreciate clarity, privately. Off the record." There it was again, the unraveling. Her version of events wasn't holding. People were starting to see through the cracks. I didn't reply. It wasn't my job to clean up the mess she made. But a strange sense of justice settled in my chest. For once, the consequences weren't mine to carry. Meanwhile, back in her world, I learned through Luke that Madison was struggling. She'd shown up late to meetings. Snapped at interns. Even missed a key presentation because she was too emotional. Apparently, the boss had noticed. Apparently, people were talking. Apparently, the mask, that perfectly polished professional facade, was slipping. And for the first time, she was the one being left out of conversations. She was becoming invisible. Karma? Maybe. But I wasn't watching for revenge. I was watching to make sure I never turned back. One night, I passed a window and caught my reflection. Not the man I used to be, tired eyes, slouched shoulders, drained from chasing scraps of affection. This version stood taller. Sharper. Quieter. But not broken. Madison had once accused me of being too sensitive. She said it like a flaw. Like caring deeply, noticing small slights, or wanting acknowledgement made me weak. But now, as I sat alone in a quiet apartment, not begging, not explaining, just existing on my own terms, I realized, she was never strong. She was just loud. I started writing again. Something I hadn't done in years. Journals turned into essays. One essay turned into a blog post. That post went semi-viral, titled, "When They Pretend You Don't Exist, Leave." The comments poured in. Men. Women. Strangers who had all felt the sting of slow erasure in their relationships. People who smiled at dinner tables while their partners ignored them. People who left without slamming the door. For the first time, my pain wasn't just mine. It had weight, and now, it had purpose. That same week, I got one final package from Madison. No return address. Just a small black box. Inside, the wedding ring I'd left behind. And a note. "You wanted to disappear. Well, you did. Now I'm the one who can't stop seeing you." No apology. No accountability. Just proof that she finally noticed what was missing. Too late. I slid the box into the trash without a second thought. Because sometimes, the cleanest revenge is never going back. Months passed. Seasons changed. I moved again, new city, new name on the lease, new people who only knew me as I was now, not who I used to be when I lived in her shadow. And Madison? She became a story I no longer needed to tell. Luke messaged once more. Said she'd taken a leave of absence from work. Something about burnout, or maybe it was just the weight of a life built on pretending. I didn't ask for updates. I didn't stalk her social media. I didn't care. Because erasing myself from her life wasn't an act of spite. It was survival. Some people cling to broken things out of nostalgia. I chose to let go, before her indifference shattered whatever fragments of dignity I had left. Was it painful? Absolutely. But walking away with your soul intact always hurts less than staying somewhere your name is never spoken, your presence never acknowledged, your love never seen. The truth? She didn't betray me with someone else's lips or lies. She betrayed me with silence. And in the end, I answered with the loudest silence of all, my absence. That was the last chapter of our story. And the first page of mine. It's strange how peace doesn't arrive with fanfare. It doesn't burst through the door or scream your name. It creeps in, quiet, slow, unnoticed at first, like the morning sun slipping through old curtains. I found peace in the ordinary. Morning coffee in silence. A walk with no one rushing me. Laughter that didn't need permission. People began to know me for who I was, not who I had to pretend to be to keep someone else's ego afloat. One day, I passed by a bakery. In the window was a couple. She was laughing. He was listening. They were fully there with each other. And for a flicker of a second, I grieved. Not for Madison. But for the version of me that once begged to be seen. He deserved better. Now he finally had it. I never blocked her. I didn't need to. She could watch me live, from a distance. No replies. No invitations. Just the cold reality of being on the outside of the life she once could have shared. And if she ever tells people I gave up on us, let her. Because I didn't give up. I just finally gave everything, back to myself. A year later, it happened. I was sitting at a cozy cafe I'd come to love, small place, with tables, real coffee, when a familiar voice called my name. Madison. I turned slowly, and there she was, thinner, a little tired, but still polished. Still performing. She looked stunned. Like seeing a ghost she'd convinced herself was never real. "I didn't think I'd ever see you again," she said softly, her voice cracked like something had been sitting on her chest for months. I didn't invite her to sit. She did anyway. She talked. About how she didn't realize how much space I took up, until it was empty. About how everything got harder after I left, how people started treating her differently, how the house felt colder. "I miss who we were," she said finally, eyes glistening. "I miss you." I nodded, took a breath, and said nothing. Because the truth was, she didn't miss me. She missed the version of me that tolerated being invisible. And that man was gone. The silence between us stretched, no anger, no drama. Just understanding. I stood up, dropped a few bills on the table, and said, calmly, "Take care of yourself, Madison." And I walked out, just like I did that night, without looking back. Only this time, I didn't feel erased. I felt whole. 2 weeks after that cafe encounter, I got a letter. Handwritten. No return address, but the handwriting was unmistakable. It wasn't long, just a single page. No blame. No theatrics. Just, her truth. "I thought making you feel small would make me feel bigger. But I didn't realize I was shrinking you to fit into a life I didn't even like. You didn't disappear from my world. I erased myself from yours. I'm sorry. Not to win you back, just so you know I finally see it." I folded the letter neatly and tucked it into the back of a book I was reading. Not as a keepsake. Not for nostalgia. Just as a quiet reminder, some people don't deserve access to the healed version of you they broke. Madison wasn't a villain. She was simply the final lesson in a long chapter of self-neglect. And me? I was no longer a man trying to be noticed. I was finally a man who noticed himself. That's the story. Not of heartbreak. But of becoming. Of walking away from a room where you were invisible. And stepping into a life where you shine, even if no one's watching. You never realize how heavy someone's presence was. Until you feel the weight of their absence, and it feels like breathing for the first time in years. I didn't just leave Madison's life. I reclaimed my own. I started saying no more often. No to being overlooked. No to dimming myself. No to anyone who made love feel like a performance I had to audition for. I started traveling. Not to escape her, but to meet the parts of myself I'd neglected. I took up photography. Laughed with strangers. Fell asleep under stars instead of ceilings that used to echo with silence. Madison was a scar, but scars don't hurt forever. Eventually, they become proof you survived. One day, someone asked me if I hated her. I smiled. No, I said. She taught me everything I needed to know, by showing me what love isn't. It happened on a quiet afternoon. I was walking through a small weekend market, camera slung around my shoulder, the smell of roasted coffee and fresh bread in the air. A band played softly in the distance, some old jazz tune I couldn't name but didn't want to forget. A woman brushed past me and smiled. Not flirtatious. Not forced. Just real. And for the first time in what felt like forever. I smiled back, without thinking of Madison, without comparing, without wondering if she'd notice. She wouldn't. And that's okay. Because Madison was a chapter, not a curse. A lesson, not a lifetime. She taught me how lonely it feels to be surrounded by people and still feel unseen. But more importantly, she taught me how to be alone, without being lonely. And now, I don't need revenge. I don't need her regret. I have something better. Peace. The kind of peace you earn after walking through fire, and realizing you were the one holding the match. This isn't the story of a man who was erased. It's the story of a man who finally found the courage to rewrite himself.